George Cornell, born George Myers, was a notorious London gangster in the 1960s, primarily known for his association with rival gangsters, the Kray twins, Ronnie and Reggie Kray, and his infamous role in the escalating tension between criminal factions in London's East End. A member of the Richardson Gang, Cornell was deeply entrenched in the gritty underworld of London, where organised crime was taking hold through racketeering, violence, and corruption. Welcome back to Crime Chronicles. Stay tuned as we look at the life of East End gangster George Cornell, a criminal who was pretty unremarkable, but would go on to live in infamy not because of what he did while alive, but because of who killed him. Cornell was born in Stepney, East London in 1927 to a working-class family. Like many youths of this era, Cornell was exposed to the harsher aspects of city life from an early age. In post-war London, opportunities were scarce and the environment was conducive to crime. Cornell, in search of power, wealth, and respect, became increasingly involved in illegal activity. In his teens and early 20s, he found himself mingling with figures in the criminal circles, ultimately setting the stage for his full immersion in gang life. Throughout the 1950s, Cornell became involved in petty theft, assault, and other lower-level criminal activities, gradually earning a reputation for his ruthlessness and boldness. His shift from small-time crime to the more organised crime world coincided with his introduction to the Richardson Gang, one of London's most powerful crime syndicates, led by Charlie and Eddie Richardson. Known for their sadistic tactics, the Richardsons would torture, intimidate, and extort those who crossed them, cementing their place as the most feared gang in South London. Cornell's association with this gang solidified his status as a key player in the London crime scene. Cornell's move into organised crime under the Richardson Gang offered him the chance to advance quickly in a world where violence and power were prized. The Richardson Gang was infamous for its willingness to use extreme violence, often involving torture techniques like the electric generator, where victims were subjected to electric shocks to extract information, money, or obedience. Known as the Torture Gang, the Richardsons and their affiliates were rivals of the Kray twins, who controlled the East End of London with equal brutality. While the Kray twins ruled the East End, the Richardson Gang dominated South London. This territorial division created an uneasy truce between the two gangs, each steering clear of the other's domain in a fragile balance of power. However, this peace was bound to fracture under the weight of egos, ambition, and a constant power struggle. Cornell, known for his confrontational and fearless nature, was one of the first to directly challenge the Kray brothers' dominance. Tensions between the Krays and Cornell began to surface in the early 1960s. Cornell's open disdain for the Krays, particularly Ronnie, escalated the animosity between the gangs. Unlike many of their contemporaries, the Krays wanted to portray themselves as cultured gangsters who mingled with celebrities and had a respectable front. However, Cornell saw through their efforts and often mocked the twins. One particularly infamous incident occurred when Cornell insulted Ronnie in public, calling him fat and making slurs about Ronnie's sexuality. This incident stung deeply given the societal attitudes of the time and Ronnie's own insecurities. Ronnie, known for his volatility and sensitivity to slights against his masculinity, became increasingly furious at Cornell's provocation. The insult not only wounded his pride, but also challenged the Craze authority, something Ronnie couldn't ignore. From that point onward, Ronnie saw Cornell as a target for elimination, and the seeds of deadly confrontation were sown. On the evening of March 9, 1966, Cornell's life met its violent end at the hands of Ronnie Kray in the Blind Beggar pub on Whitechapel Road, an event that would become one of the most notorious murders in London's gangland history. The previous night had seen a brutal clash between the Richardson Gang and the Craze, escalating the animosity between the two. Cornell, showing a lack of regard for the Cray's power, walked into the Blind Beggar pub, located deep in Kray territory. Whether Cornell intended to provoke the Craze by appearing in their territory, or if he was merely there by chance, remains a matter of speculation. Cornell was seated calmly, having a drink and conversing with friends, when Ronnie Kray entered the pub. Witnesses recall a tense silence settling over the room as Ronnie approached Cornell with a steely determination. Without hesitation, Ronnie pulled out a revolver and shot Cornell in the head at close range, killing him almost instantly. As Cornell lay dying, Ronnie reportedly stood over him to ensure he had accomplished his mission. The cold-blooded nature of the murder sent shockwaves through London's criminal underworld and cemented Ronnie's reputation as a ruthless killer. The murder of George Cornell was a watershed moment for the Craze. It demonstrated Ronnie's willingness to use violence without regard for witnesses or consequences, underscoring the twins' escalating brutality. However, the brazen nature of the murder would also prove to be a significant factor in the Cray's eventual downfall. While the murder went largely unsolved in the immediate aftermath, Cornell's killing remained a stain on the Cray's record and increased police attention on the twins and their operations. Cornell's murder did not bring the Craze the dominance they had hoped for. Instead, it only intensified the police crackdown on organised crime in London. In 1968, both Ronnie and Reggie Kray were arrested along with several members of their gang. Cornell's murder, alongside other violent crimes committed by the Craze, became pivotal in building a case against them. Witnesses from the Blind Beggar pub and other associates eventually came forward, helping to provide the evidence needed to convict the twins. The trial of the Kray twins was widely publicised, bringing unprecedented media attention to the world of organised crime in London. The murder of George Cornell was a focal point of the prosecution's case against Ronnie, showcasing his violent and unpredictable nature. The evidence against the twins, coupled with testimonies from former associates, ultimately led to their convictions. In 1969, Ronnie and Reggie Kray were sentenced to life imprisonment, marking the end of their reign over London's East End. While George Cornell was a relatively low-profile figure compared to the Craze, his murder is an indelible part of London's criminal history. His death at the hands of Ronnie Kray underscores the violent rivalry that defined London's gangland culture during the 1960s. The murder marked a turning point that led to increased police scrutiny and the eventual downfall of the Craze, whose grip on London's East End was dismantled in the years that followed. Cornell's decision to confront the Craze in their own territory ultimately cost him his life, but also served as a catalyst for ending the unchecked violence that plagued London. In many ways, Cornell's death symbolized the unsustainable nature of gang rivalry and the inevitable self-destruction that awaited those who chose a life of organized crime. Thank you for joining us today on Crime Chronicles. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the channel with your friends.